passengers across Britain are being warned not to travel by train today as members of the RMT union began 12 days of strikes that last right across the festive period. And more on that now, which is our top story today. We've been speaking to the man who's behind all those union negotiations. Mick Lynch is that man. You might recognise the name, certainly recognise the face when you see him in a moment. And I started by asking him about what the Transport Secretary said today, that Mick Lynch was losing the support of his members.
No, he's not right. Our members have recently voted in both strands of this dispute by a margin of about 9-1 on very high turnouts, that they wanted to continue with the campaign, with the strike action that's been proven necessary, and with the overtime ban, and they're out on the picket lines today. Unfortunately, we've had to stop the railway and cause the strike action, which people find so hard to take. And we've also had a referendum this week on a massive turnout, 84% I think it was. And our members voted very heavily in favour of rejecting the offer that's come from Network Rail, and the offer that's come from the train operating companies is completely untenable and unacceptable, and our members will not support that, and they're determined to get an agreement from their employer, which is moderated and mediated by the government in effect, that they can support. So I'll be working with all parties, including the government and the companies, to try and get a better offer that we can put to our members in a vote, and hopefully it will be in a position where we can accept that fairly soon.
But I think what he said was that almost 40% of the workforce voted in favour of the latest settlement. He says the tide is turning.
Well, 40% didn't vote, 36% voted in favour of it, and 64% voted against it. So 2/3 of his employees voted against it in Network Rail. Network Rail put on a big effort. They made films. They took our members and their staff to compulsory briefings. Their managers were deployed in every depot in the country, in every station. And his staff, the Network Rail rank and file, turned that down in a very heavy vote. And it's a vote that would stand up in any election that we have, in any council or for an MP or whatever. It was a very clear mandate that they didn't want to accept the offer and that they want to continue. We told them that if it was rejected, there would be more industrial action. So twice in the past few weeks, they voted very heavily in favour of further industrial action in support of our campaign to get them a square deal, and that's what we're pursuing.
Can I ask you, where are you willing to compromise? Are you willing to move on the pay deal? Are you willing to move on the modernisation of the railways? Where can there be a settlement?
There's a settlement available, and the railway executives know what they need to do. So we need some modifications of what they've proposed in terms of what they're calling railway reform or modernisation. And there is some improvements on pay that they can make and they can afford. And the companies are saying it's got to be self-funded. We're dealing with that, and we know that we can get a settlement and that there is compromises to be made. But they need to make some compromises as well. For instance, on the train operating side, they've said that we must accept driver-only operation, which we've opposed for 40 years, and have had strike action on that over the past five or 6 years. And they know that we can never agree to that. So it's not very clever negotiations to put an item on the table at the last minute at the direction of the government that they know is going to torpedo the talks.
Let me ask you about some of the other people affected by this. I don't know what people have been telling you down there on the picket lines, but what about public support? Because one of the things you've been accused of is timing these to ruin Christmas.
Well, we don't want to do that. The reason the strikes are at this time, we didn't have any strikes for 2 months, and even on this latest phase of action, we gave a 3-week notice, which is above the minimum legal deadline. So there's been ample opportunity for these companies and the government to come to agreement with us. They just simply won't do it.
Why couldn't it have been January,
what's happening
though,
this week well, I'll tell you now, from the 15th of December, Network Rail have informed us that they will implement their changes without our agreement. And the statutory redundancy notices that they've put in front of us, Section 188 redundancy notice, will come into effect. People will be redeployed and they'll start making people redundant. So we have to respond to that. We cannot accept that coming through, that imposition passively. We have to respond. They know we're in dispute. They know that they don't have to do that. If they hadn't escalated the dispute in the way that they have chosen to in the last couple of weeks, we wouldn't have had to take this form of action. But because they've done that, we have to respond. Now, we're hoping they'll come back to the table, ease that pressure, make some concessions, and we can get a mutual agreement between all the parties, which is Network Rail, the TOCs and the government, as well as ourselves, to get a settlement to all the elements in this dispute.
Every time I talk to you, there's something you've been accused of. I think last time we spoke, you've been accused of being a Marxist. Today, I don't know if you've seen this from Lord Sugar, who's seen one of your interviews. He says, Mick Lynch loves the cameras. Next thing, he'll be doing Strictly or appearing on Graham Norton. Anyone know how much he's paid? What are your plans for 2023?
Well, I've no plans to be on Strictly, and if I was on it, I'd probably be one of the professionals rather than one of the guests. So that's how good I am at dancing, if you've seen me, ever get the chance. It's nonsense. If people have got to resort to that, you know that they're losing the argument. What I want, I'm a trade unionist. I'm a working-class bloke from a working-class background like Lord Sugar. And what I want to do is settle this dispute on an honest basis where everyone can walk away with it with a bit of dignity so that they can say, look, this is a good deal for everyone. And if he wants to put that sort of abuse out, I don't care. It's not relevant to me. I've seen some of his programmes, which are frankly appalling. So he can get on with doing that, and I can get on with representing working-class men and women in my union. But if he wants to help, he can always offer his light and his guidance to all those people in the railway business that are maybe seeking his advice. But I don't think you'll get many takers for that.